Hey guys, tonight we step into the swirling fog of Victorian London, where the streets are slick with soot and the air smells like chimney smoke and coal tar. You're not exactly dressed for the occasion: modern hoodie, sneakers, no top hat in sight, but the gas lamps don't seem to mind. Neither does the small, almost invisible alley you're now inching into, ducking past the laundry lines and coal chutes. It's narrow here, too narrow. You can feel the damp brick on either side of your arms as you shuffle sideways toward the faintest orange glow at the end. This isn't your usual corner bookstore. The door in front of you is thick, warped wood held together by iron studs, and it sighs as you push it open, like it hasn't moved in 100 years. It probably hasn't. The bell overhead jangles in a confused, tinny tone, like even it didn't expect company. But you step inside anyway, because you've come this far, and honestly, you probably won't survive this without a proper story to carry back. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And while you're at it, drop a comment with your city and what time it is where you are. Always fun to see where these stories find you. And now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You stand just inside the doorway, eyes adjusting slowly to the warm glow of the interior. Gaslight sconces hiss from the walls, casting flickering golden pools over books that tower in leaning stacks. This place doesn't have shelves so much as geological layers, Victorian strata of novels, memoirs, pamphlets, and ledgers. You step carefully around a pile marked for burning, though the handwriting looks suspiciously hopeful. Your footsteps echo slightly on the creaky, uneven floorboards. That sound, sharp leather soles on aged wood, is your first real sensory souvenir. A sound historians rarely describe, but one you'll remember. Each step is a little theatrical. Like walking into a stage set, or perhaps the slow reveal of an ancient library in a long-forgotten castle. The kind of place where, if you knock the right book loose, a secret door might open. The scent hits you next, not full force, not all at once. It's subtle, like entering an old church or a grandparent's attic that happens to hold a PhD. You smell varnished wood, ink both fresh and faded, and leather sweet, dry, and cracking at the edges. There's even something slightly metallic. Could be the ink, could be old blood. Who's to say? Historically, bookshops in the Victorian era were booming, particularly in cities like London, where literacy rates were rising and serialized fiction ruled the streets. Dickens wasn't just a household name, he was practically an event. People lined up weekly to buy his chapters like they were waiting for the next iPhone drop. Some would read the latest chapter aloud at dinner parties. Yes, that dramatic, but not all books were so public. Some shops doubled as discreet outlets for controversial ideas: abolitionist essays, women's suffrage manifestos, anti-monarchy rants disguised as theological debates. Historians still argue whether some bookshops served as coded safe houses for revolutionaries. But this one? This place feels less political and more peculiar. Your fingers trail along a row of thick tomes, each spine labeled in gold leaf script that's faded or half scraped off. One book, Practical Phrenology for Everyday Use, gives you the willies. Another, The Morality of Umbrella Usage, earns a well-deserved eye roll. Who wrote that, and why? More importantly, who read it? A muffled clatter draws your gaze to the back, or a curtained doorway sways slightly, as if someone or something just passed through. You squint, trying to decide whether to follow, but the front window distracts you. Outside, the fog has thickened, curling ghost-like around the gas lamp that sputters weakly in the alley. You can't hear any carriages or footsteps. Just the steady, rhythmic tshh of the gaslight's breath and the soft creak of the sign above the shop door. That sign, by the way, reads, Maridu & Sons, Books, Curios, Secrets. You're not sure whether Sons is a real claim or just a marketing flourish. Nobody's seen a Maridu Jr. in decades, probably. There's a small iron stove in the corner, its heat barely keeping the damp chill at bay. Someone's tossed a few wood shavings in there along with what looks suspiciously like a shredded ledger. No questions asked. A brass clock ticks irregularly behind the counter, and next to it sits a ledger not for sales, but for events. One page notes March 12th, stranger asked about the breathing book again. Told him it was out on loan. Lied March 14th, cat won't stop staring at third shelf, east wall. Might be ghost again March 16th, fog unusually thick. One regular failed to return. You close the book quietly and take a deep breath. There's something intoxicating about this place. Not just the sensory overload of old paper, dust, and wax, but something older, sleepier. You feel yourself softening into the rhythm of the shop. Like it's rewinding your inner clock by about 150 years. A bell chimes again. You didn't touch the door. You turn, slowly. The shop is still empty. Or maybe it isn't. One of the shadowy corners seems a little darker than before. Maybe that's just the gaslight flickering again. Or maybe Maridu himself is watching, curious about your modern clothes and suspicious silence. That's the moment you realize you're not here to buy a book. You're here because the bookshop wanted you, and it's not done with you yet. You don't move at first. Your feet are rooted to the warped wood like the shop itself has decided to grow over you. But eventually, the scent draws you forward, a warm, rich perfume of old bindings, wax-polished wood, and something that can only be described as crumbling knowledge. It's not just any book smell. It's Victorian bookshop smell. That curious alchemy of chemistry and nostalgia, the lignin in aging paper breaking down into vanilla-like aromas, the sharp tang of iron gall ink oxidizing on parchment, and the dry, slightly bitter scent of too long unread leather you inhale again. Is that pepper? No, wait, clove oil. People used to hide cloves in books to keep silverfish away. Not very effective, but delightfully spicy. There's a faint undertone of mold, too. Not the black and hazardous kind, this is book mold. The ghost of moisture that's lingered too long in a spine, curling pages into sleepy frowns. You get the feeling the building itself might be held together with mildew and mischief. You step deeper into the labyrinth of leaning shelves. One false move and an avalanche of hardcovers might crush you in an instant. A noble death, you think. Cause of death, trapped beneath first editions. There's a row of volumes labeled Domestic Science, all of them eager to tell you how to properly boil cabbage and what kind of soap best preserves your reputation. One charming little blue book instructs the Victorian housewife to rub lemon on her elbows weekly to maintain an air of gentility. Another recommends airing out your corset in moonlight to remove unseemly odors. Historians agree that books like these were wildly popular among the middle class, especially women seeking upward social mobility in a world obsessed with manners. But the debates rage on. Was this knowledge empowering, or just another cage disguised as wisdom? Depends on who's reading. You drift past a shelf of poetry now, where someone's left a pair of pince-nez glasses balanced across a Tennyson collection. Are they still warm? You check. You don't want to check, but you do. Nope. Cold. Either a ghost has poor taste in poetry, or you just touched a stranger's antique spectacles. Probably both. There's a certain sound you start to notice the longer you stand here, the soft shiver of pages moving without wind. It's not dramatic. Just a whisper here and there, a flick like someone barely breathing over the paper. Could be the floor settling, sure. Could also be that one of the books just exhaled. Either way, you don't want to test the theory. You step around a teetering stack of travelogues. One of them, through the Belgian marshes with only a hat pin and a smile, seems deeply optimistic. Another recounts the author's near-fatal obsession with trains in Prussia. You run a finger along the edge of the cover. It leaves a small puff of dust in the air, visible in the weak gaslight, a moment of golden mist that vanishes as quickly as it formed. You reach a table near the center of the room where rarer tomes lie open, as if frozen mid-thought. One is a ledger listing book orders from 1879, written in looping script with ink that's turned brown with age. Names like Mrs. Peabody and Dr. Fenwick repeat throughout. You wonder if they ever met. Maybe over tea and a shared fascination with fencing manuals. You glance up and see a mirror, framed in tarnished brass and probably older than Canada. Your reflection looks strange. Dimmer. As though the light from your phone screen wouldn't dare show its face in here. It's just you, cloaked in dust motes and faint doubt, surrounded by the scent of dead ideas. There's movement again. A soft scuff of leather shoes on wood. You spin, heart doing a polite Victorian flutter. Nothing. Just the stacks. Maybe a floorboard shifted. Or maybe the shop is breathing with you. There's something else in the air now, a dry, almost bitter smell. You follow it like a bloodhound of weird. It leads you to a closed cabinet tucked behind an oversized globe that's out of date by about 7 empires. The cabinet has tiny brass handles and a keyhole shaped like a keyhole should never be shaped. You try the door. Locked. Of course, but it smells unmistakably of the forbidden. You crouch, nose just above the brass. The scent is sharp, ancient paper, ink, and something vaguely meaty. Like if someone printed a book on beef jerky. You back away slowly. The books inside, whatever they are, don't want to be disturbed. This moment of olfactory trespassing is interrupted by the soft ping of a bell upstairs. A bell you didn't know existed. You look up toward a crooked wooden staircase, the kind that squeaks even when no one's using it. A curl of tobacco smoke wafts down, mingling with the heavier library scents. Someone's up there. Victorian bookshops often had living quarters above or behind them. Owners would live among their stock, sometimes even sleeping in hammocks between shelves. One eccentric bibliophile reportedly trained himself to nap vertically so as not to waste any horizontal space that could be used for stacking folios. Still unverified, but entirely plausible. Historians still argue whether these arrangements were practical or just deeply unhinged. You're about to head toward the stairs when your eye catches a flash of red in a shadowy alcove. A book on display, singular, pristine, and roped off like it's sacred. It's bound in crimson leather with no title on the spine. Just a brass plate that reads, "The Memory Archive." Below it, a typed note, "Do not open." Contents shift. Cool. Great. You absolutely won't open it. But now it's in your brain, poking at your curiosity like a mosquito with a PhD. You step back and let it be. For now, you shake off the dust from your sleeves and look around, breathing in the full, bizarre bouquet of the shop: sandalwood polish, rotting parchment, hot metal, old pipe smoke, and the ghost of ink bottles past. It's the scent of an era before deodorant was common and soap came in intimidating blocks that doubled as blunt weapons. You take another cautious step toward the staircase, the floor groaning its complaint underfoot. Whatever and whoever is waiting upstairs, it smells like tobacco, machine oil, and possibly secrets, and you're going to meet them. Your hand brushes the carved banister as you ascend, each step unleashing a new set of groans from the reluctant stairs. The wood is warm, strangely, like it's been touched recently, too recently. A faint trail of smoke curls downward from above, mingling with that well-worn bouquet of Victorian funk: pipe tobacco, candle wax, ink that never quite dries, and the dry, slightly singed scent of old books that have wandered too close to an open flame. At the landing, you pause. The upstairs is somehow darker than downstairs, though logic should make that impossible. One gas lamp flickers from the far wall, throwing long, quivering shadows across the hallway. At the end of it, a door slightly ajar, a sliver of orange light, and the unmistakable rhythm of voices, low, deliberate, and whispering. You push the door open gently inside, the room glows with firelight and dust. The ceiling slopes low, its beams bowed like tired shoulders. There's an armchair positioned beside the hearth, its leather shiny with use and age. Across from it, another figure, tall, wrapped in a faded smoking jacket, spectacles glinting like twin moons. Neither of them turns at first, but the whispering continues. That's when you realize it's not the people speaking. It's the books, more precisely, the shelves that line every wall, all filled with half-open volumes. Each one muttering fragments of sentences, ideas, questions. Not loudly, more like the sound of people trying to read to themselves without moving their lips. If you try hard enough, you can almost catch words: revolution, catastrophe, lemon custard, betrayal. One voice keeps repeating inkblot, inkblot, inkblot. And over all this white noise comes the creak of the floorboards. Someone's finally noticed you. A long, pale hand gestures you forward. Join us, the man says without looking up. Quietly, please. The folios are mid-argument. You blink, unsure whether he's joking. He's not smiling, so probably not. You take a seat on a footstool made from stacked encyclopedias, ASC, specifically. The cushion feels like it's stuffed with balled-up tax receipts. Comfortable, in a very Victorian gilt kind of way, the man turns slowly toward you. His face is long and angular, and he wears a brass monocle that clicks faintly when he blinks. You realize the clicking isn't just a sound, it's a mechanism. The lens is rotating through tiny gears, zooming and adjusting like a Victorian robot. Mr. Maridu, he says, extending a hand. Proprietor, curator, accidental archivist. His grip is firm, slightly dusty. You wonder if the dust is on his palm or just an ambient condition of the room. I've been expecting you, he adds, almost as an afterthought. You raise a brow. Have you really? No, he admits, but it sounds more dramatic that way, doesn't it? You like this guy? The woman in the armchair nods a greeting without speaking. She wears a librarian's bun so severe it might hold a minor grudge, and her hands are gloved in velvet, though one finger is bare where she's holding a smoking pipe with peculiar precision. You have a sense she knows more than she lets on, possibly about you. The whispering from the books grows louder, a kind of literary bickering. You hear snippets. Shakespeare never wrote that. I was first published in French, not German, thank you very much. Your preface is a lie. Your bibliography is scandalous. Marido sighs and snaps his fingers. Quiet reading, please. A hush falls over the shelves. You didn't know books could obey. The conversation turns mundane for a moment. Marido asks how you found the shop. You say something about fog and curiosity. He nods, satisfied. The usual. You ask about the smells. Why does every corner of this place have its own aroma? Because, he says, books are sponges. They soak in whatever surround. Spices, ink, skin oil, rain, even moods. You can smell someone's heartbreak in a diary if you hold it close enough. Is he being poetic? Or serious? You lean in and ask about the floorboards. Why do they seem to creak only when you're thinking about something unsettling? He chuckles. The floorboards are selective. They prefer drama. A beat. The fire crackles. You hear footsteps below, someone entering the shop. Maridu doesn't flinch. We get wanderers. Some stay. Some forget. Some were never really here. You try to decide if you're reassured or mildly threatened by that. Then, the woman finally speaks. Would you like to hear something unsettling? You nod slowly. Obviously, she pulls a book from the side table. It's thick and battered, with no title. She opens it and begins to read aloud in a calm, even tone. The words seem benign, an excerpt from a travel journal, maybe. But as she speaks, the room tilts just slightly, as if the geometry of the walls is less confident than it used to be. The whispering books hush again, listening. You realize her story is describing the very room you're in. The flicker of the fire. The smell of ink. The exact words Maridu just spoke, the page was written before this moment, but includes it. You look over her shoulder and glimpse the next line. The visitor stands slowly, now realizing, you stand quickly. Just to defy it, they both smile. You're catching on, Maridu says, tapping his monocle. Very good. Victorian bookshops weren't always about commerce. In many cases, they were crossroads of intellect, eccentricity, and low-key sorcery. Historians still argue whether the shop of Enoch Ravensdale, active in Whitechapel from 1861 to 1873, was actually a disguised printing press for forbidden alchemical texts or just a clever branding stunt. In either case, his customers reported things like time loops, prophetic ink stains, and one particularly judgmental goat. You're beginning to understand how those rumors might have started. The scent of pipe smoke deepens. Maridu looks toward the window, where dawn is still several hours away. Would you like to see the collection? He asks, rising with a fluid motion that shouldn't be possible for a man of his apparent age. Which collection? You ask warily. He gestures toward a second door. One with a large brass handle shaped like a quill, the one we don't open for just anyone. Of course. Because what's a Victorian bookshop without at least one room full of things that should definitely be locked? The woman leans back and nods again. It's better if you don't breathe too deeply in there. Wonderful. You follow Maridu toward the door, your footsteps silent now. The floorboards, it seems, are also curious. The door swings inward with a reluctant sigh, like it's just been woken from a long nap and doesn't appreciate the interruption. The hinges groan in a way that says, you were warned. Beyond it, a staircase curls downward, spiraling into a darkness so thick it feels more like a texture than an absence of light. Maridu pauses, striking a match on the heel of his shoe and lighting an oil lantern that hisses softly to life. Careful, he murmurs, handing you the lantern. Some of the spines down there bite. You laugh, because of course that's a joke. Probably. But when you pass through the doorway, the air shifts. It's colder here, and wetter. The scent of tobacco fades, replaced by something denser. Earthy. Almost mineral. A cocktail of damp leather, mildew, iron, and the distinct aroma of time behaving badly. You descend slowly, the walls pressing closer with every turn of the stair. At the bottom, you step into what must once have been the basement, except it doesn't feel like a basement. It feels like a crypt that got tired of holding bones and decided to hold secrets instead. The walls are lined with bookshelves, naturally, but here, the shelves curve inward, forming strange alcoves. The books are arranged in no logical order. One shelf labeled Astrophysics contains an etiquette manual, 3 books of spells, and a personal journal from a chimney sweep named Greg. Another shelf has no label at all, just a drawing of an eye scratched into the wood with something that clearly wasn't a PEND. Smells of long-sealed attics and rain-soaked linen. Of wax seals broken too late and things written in languages that never had alphabets. It smells haunted, if that's a smell. And yes, it is. You pass a narrow alcove where a cluster of books seem to huddle together, their spines turned inward. One of them trembles ever so slightly, like it's trying to whisper but has forgotten the words. Don't touch those, Maridu warns. They're part of the Unreliable Narrator series. Each one contradicts the last. If you read more than 3 in a row, you might forget which century you're in. You glance back nervously. Is that what happened to Greg? Merido gives you a look that says Greg knows what he did. You move on. Victorian England wasn't short on eccentric collectors, and private libraries could be sprawling, secretive, and intensely curated. Some nobles hoarded books on gardening, some on ghost summoning, some on both. There's a fringe theory among bibliographic historians that the Duchess of Malvern had a hidden library exclusively dedicated to books written by people who vanished under mysterious circumstances. Historians still argue whether the library ever truly existed or if it was just a ghost story she invented to deter nosy houseguests. Down here, you wouldn't be surprised if that entire library had somehow migrated under this very shop. You reach a small table near the center of the room, lit only by the soft glow of your lantern. A book lies open there. The pages are thick and stiff, written in brown ink that might have once been black or might have once been blood. The script curls in odd directions, occasionally doubling back on itself as if trying to escape the paper. You glance at the title. There isn't one dot. Instead, a handwritten note beneath it reads, "Don't read aloud." Seriously. Okay, that's comforting. You lean closer. The page describes a man who wanders into a bookshop and descends into a strange cellar where he finds a book that describes a man who wanders into a bookshop, right? Moving on, you find a cabinet labeled Olfactory Experiments. Inside, tiny vials are arranged next to books that seem to shimmer ever so slightly under your lantern's light. Merido peers over your shoulder. Smell is memory, he explains softly. We tried preserving stories through scent, bottling the emotional weight of certain chapters. Some worked. Others, he trails off. You pick up one bottle and uncork it cautiously. The scent hits like lightning, scorched paper, rosewater, and a sharp metallic tang that makes your eyes water. Suddenly you remember something that never happened to you: a fight in a drawing room, someone yelling about betrayal, a gloved hand slapping a cane across the floorboards. You put the bottle down quickly. That one's a love story, Merido says, almost apologetically. Tragic, obviously. You ask how this place exists. Why none of it is documented. Why there aren't signs pointing tourists toward the occult archive of literary chaos just beneath London's surface. He smiles, and for the first time, you notice that his teeth are not quite modern, because if you advertise a mystery, it stops being one. He gestures to the far corner, where an iron gate stands open just enough to tempt you. You hold up your lantern and step forward, the floor here clicking beneath your boots like keys turning in old locks. The gate leads to another room, this one smaller, but stranger. The books in here are bound in fabrics you don't recognize. Some shimmer like beetle wings. One smells distinctly of cinnamon and burnt feathers. Another hums softly when you get close. Literally hums. These, Merido whispers, are the ones no one finished writing. You stare at the shelves, confused. They're incomplete, he clarifies. Abandoned drafts, lost manuscripts, half-written ideas. We find them sometimes, buried in attics, misfiled in estate sales. The stories keep trying to complete themselves. You reach for one. Its cover pulses beneath your fingers. You pull it free and flip it open. The first page is blank. The second page says, she opened the book and saw her own reflection. The third page is empty again. You snap it shut and return it to the shelf. I think it knows I'm here, you mutter. Merido nods. They usually do. There's a ticking sound in the room now. Not a clock, exactly. More like a countdown that doesn't know what it's counting down to. You realize that the books here aren't silent. They're just holding their breath. I think that's enough for tonight, Merido says quietly, and suddenly you agree. As you follow him back through the iron gate, you take one last deep breath of the archive's impossible scent, a heady mix of petrichor, candle soot, lavender, and the fleeting fear that stories might be reading you, too. Back up the stairs you go, each step releasing the chill of the archive like exhaled secrets. The door swings shut behind you with a decisive click, and you're back in the upper reading room, still warm, still wrapped in amber light, but now touched by the shadow of whatever it was you just experienced. Meridu removes the lantern from your hand with care, like taking a relic from a shaken pilgrim. You did well, he says. Only one hallucination, no echoing laughter, and you didn't try to take anything. Better than most. You blink. People try to take the books? Oh, constantly, he says. They usually regret it. The books always find their way back, but sometimes they leave impressions. He gestures toward a nearby shelf where a faint silhouette of a hand is permanently scorched into the wood, like someone had tried to clutch a volume and been caught mid-thought. You resist the urge to say something sarcastic. The image is still warm. Meridu settles back into his chair with a groan that might belong to the furniture or the man. It's impossible to tell. Outside, the fog thickens against the windows, curling like a cat with secrets. It's nearing midnight now, though time in here seems fluid. The old grandfather clock near the wall ticks a little too slowly, as if each second must be convinced. You sit back down, and Meridu leans toward the hearth, stoking the flames until they flare and spit briefly, releasing a burst of pine and something like dried oranges. A new scent enters the room: oilcloth, burnt parchment, and cinnamon. Apparently, the fire here has a spice rack. It's a sensory tapestry, he says, following your nose. Each floor is curated not just by subject, but by atmosphere. You ask if he's being literal. Oh, painfully so, he replies. Victorian bookshops weren't just about literature. They were about immersion. The truly devoted used scent to anchor genre: jasmine for romance, coal smoke for industrial treatises, peppermint for satire. One particularly eccentric bookseller in Bloomsbury insisted that every mystery novel be paired with the aroma of overripe pears and candle wax. He said it heightened the sense of decay and tension. You snort. He also wore one shoe made of marzipan, Meridu adds. So you know, grain of salt. Historians still argue whether that was a metaphor or just a very impractical dessert. He leans back now, the leather of the chair groaning like it's trying to warn you. Do you want to hear a story about the kind of customer we used to get? Of course you do. He closes his eyes and begins. There was a man, always a man, isn't it, named Colonel Sebastian Raleigh. Retired, pipe-smoking, mustache waxed to within an inch of its life. Came in every Tuesday, rain or shine, demanding to be shown our classified section. We didn't have one. But he insisted. Said he'd heard things. Eventually, we showed him the cellar. You raise an eyebrow. The one I just saw? Meridu chuckles. Oh no, that cellar didn't exist yet. This was an earlier version. Still dangerous, still damp, but far fewer whispering texts. He disappeared into a stack labeled myths that might be manuals and didn't come back for hours. And when he did? Meridu stares at the fire. He never touched a pipe again. Said the smoke smelled like confessions. You're not sure if he's messing with you. You're not sure he's sure. Suddenly, something rustles above you. Not the usual creaks. This is softer, more insistent. A swishing sound, like wings or pages flipping in unison. You glance up. A trapdoor in the ceiling yawns slightly open, and from it dangles a rope ladder. The air shifts again. Warmer this time, scented with beeswax polish, cigar smoke, and a hint of something almost floral. Not quite rose. Not quite lavender. Something Victorian. You know it when you smell it, even if you can't name it. Meridu says, not even looking up. The third floor wants you. Of course it does. Is it safe? He smiles. Define safe. You sigh and grab the rope ladder. The climb is quiet, except for the occasional shudder of wood as something above prepares itself for your arrival. When your head finally breaches the floorboards, You pull yourself into a space unlike anything else in the shop. The third floor is an attic, but not like any attic you've known. There are no dusty boxes, no forgotten trunks. Instead, the floor is arranged like a Victorian gentleman's club collided with an observatory. There are telescopes aimed at dusty skylights, globes of outdated geography, and enormous armchairs upholstered in burgundy velvet. The books here are thicker, older, and more serious looking. They stare at you. The air up here smells of aging parchment, shaving soap, and mothballs, the refined decay of upper-class clutter, and yet, there's music. Faint, but unmistakable. A crackling gramophone in the corner plays a scratchy rendition of Greensleeves, just loud enough to give the room a heartbeat. You wander, letting your fingers trail along a glass case filled with ink pens, each labeled with the name of its most notorious user. One reads, "Pen used by anonymous diarist of the 1863 Fog murders." Another simply says, "Last pen of Wilkes the Unremembered." You hesitate at a book that seems to be covered in bark. Literal bark. The tag underneath reads, "Compiled entirely by forest-dwelling poetesses, some of whom were allegedly trees." There's even a reading chair rigged with a foot-pedal fan. It wheezes dramatically when you sit in it, puffing air that smells faintly of licorice and regret. This floor is different. Less haunted, more indulgent. This is the smell of those who could afford to be curious. The idle rich who read about revolutions between sips of brandy and exhalations of cigar smoke. You think you detect the scent of snuff and damp opera gloves if Victorian society had its own perfume, and it lingered wherever books, whiskey, and gossip were in high supply. A known fact, Queen Victoria herself was partial to white rose scent, cloying and ever present in the court. Less well known? Her court physicians once advised her to avoid libraries during storms, claiming the mingling of damp book glue and royal perfume could produce nervous delusions. Historians still argue whether that was legitimate advice or just a subtle way to keep her out of the reading room during thunder. Here, in this room, you understand what they meant. The smell of knowledge is dense here. Pungent. Persuasive. You breathe it in, and you swear, for just a second. The globes spin of their own accord. Downstairs, a bell chimes once. Someone has entered the shop. You glance down through the ladder shaft, but Meridew isn't visible. The gramophone crackles louder. A voice, this time not music. "Careful what you open," it says in a dry, papery whisper. You freeze, then, softly, a book near you unlatches itself. The cover opens slowly, like the yawning mouth of a patient predator. You walk toward it, your feet silent on the old boards, because of course you do.